So I may have gotten lucky. What happened was the wife and I were looking around in our favorite flea market slash antique store. We picked up a few items, and as I'm walking out, I spot this clock sitting on the side. It's just a mechanism, no case, but my first thought is this looks like it's about the same size as that New Haven clock that I'm trying to fix. So I asked the guy how much does he want for it, and he looks at it and he says, just take it. So I did. And it's a Lincoln, which also caught my eye. I've never heard of a Lincoln clock, and it says self-starting on it. And I haven't plugged it in yet. I just got it. And if I get really lucky and this is working, or I can get it to work, I do believe that it will fit, because as you can see here, it's pretty much the same size. So let me get started. I'll plug it in first, see if it runs, and then take it from there. It's also pretty much the same width. But anyway, let me plug it in and see what happens. Okay, got it plugged in. We'll turn it on. And it's not running. Okay, next step is going to be to figure out how to take it apart. Let me take a look, and then we'll continue. Okay, I flipped it over. What I'm seeing on the back, just a couple of nuts holding the plate on. It says set time. The set stem is missing its knob. And it reads that this is manufactured by the Galter Products Company in Chicago, Illinois, licensed by Westinghouse Electric Corporation. No dates though, but I'm thinking it's not as old as some of the ones that I've been working on. But let me get these two nuts off and we'll see what we find. Let's put this aside. That's one. Okay. Oh, interesting. Very similar to some of the recent ones I've been working on with that little screw type gear. Let me plug it in again and give this little flywheel a spin and see if I can get it going. Okay, let me turn it on. Oh, it's starting to turn a little bit on its own. Look at that. Maybe just spinning it the way I did freed it up a bit. How about that? It's running. But clearly it looks like it needs a good clean and lube. Get everything lubricated in there so that it's running properly from the start. So the next step will be to totally disassemble it. And I'll start by removing the dial, the glass, the hands first, as I usually do. And interesting, this particular one looks like it's duct taped in place here, rather than little metal tabs being bent over the sides. So let me work on peeling that off and seeing what I find. So give me a couple of minutes to work on that, and then we'll continue with it. Let's just shut it off. You know what? Let's turn it back on, see if it just hits full speed again. Yeah, it's a little slow to get there, but it does. All right, let's work on taking it apart. But before I even start to take it apart, let's see if it's actually going to fit in the other case. Oh, look at that. I think that's about as perfect as you could hope for. I think if I get this working properly, which I think I can, this is going to work out quite well. The one thing I'll probably look to do though is replace this Lincoln dial with the original one that came with the New Haven. I kind of like this one better. All right, very good. All right, back to undoing all of this duct tape. I've removed most of the duct tape, and what's interesting is underneath it, what I discovered is a couple of these little tabs that are bent that secure the rim to this back plate. And I see a couple of spots over here where there used to be tabs, but they have broken off. In any event, I'm going to bend these back to try to remove it. What I want to do first, though, to make it easier to handle, is remove this power cord. Okay. Let's pry these up. Okay, put that aside for now, and next work on taking the hands out. They look like a pretty simple friction grip. I should be able to pry them off. We'll see how easily it goes. Okay, next, the minute. This one's a bit snug, so I'm going to do my usual applying a bit of WD-40 on the stem here to help loosen it up. So I'll do that. And give that 5 or 10 minutes to soak in, and then I'll try again. Okay, it's been soaking for a few minutes. Let's see how easy it is now to remove the hands. There's one. That little snug. And two. Then we'll remove the dial, which appears to be either permanently attached or glued to this plate. Not really coming off, but doesn't matter because I don't plan to reuse this. So let me work on removing the whole mechanism. Looks like just 3 nuts on these posts here. So I'll undo that and then we will continue. But before I undo them, I just want to take a few photos of the arrangement of the gears in here. Just in case something gets dislodged, I'll know exactly how it goes back together. So let me work on that. Then I'll get back to removing them. Before I remove them though, I want to show one thing. Sometimes when you're opening up these clocks, you come across some unusual things, but this particular thing is the strangest that I've seen yet. When I was looking at the back plate and reading the information that was on it, I didn't realize it until I flipped it over, but there's images here of Hopalong Cassidy. And unless you were a child of the 50s, you might not have ever even heard of this guy. It was a Saturday morning show that you would watch along with the other cartoons. What this is doing here, what kind of clock this was, I have no idea. The weird thing is it was positioned with the image inside, so you wouldn't even know that it was here until you opened it up. Perhaps this is a clock that somebody totally made themselves, or which doesn't make sense because this is company printing on the back here. So again, I have no idea where this thing came from, but about as strange as I've seen. Anyway, let me get back to removing the rotor from the back of this mechanism. There's one. Two. I think I should be able to just lift the rotor right off of here. Okay. Now this seems to be a sealed unit. I don't know if or how I can lubricate it to get it moving at full speed right off the bat. Perhaps it always starts slow and then reaches its maximum speed, but anyway, let me proceed with getting into the gears here. There's 3 more nuts over here I have to remove, and then this plate should come out. So let me work on that next. There's one. And 2. Already I see gears falling out of here. I got to be careful with this. Looks like there's a separate little gasket is what I would call this, and it looks like it's broken. And I'll try to lift up this plate without disturbing the gears, hopefully. All right, seems to be free. Okay, it looks like a little something on this set knob that's blocking it. I don't know if it's debris or too thick, but let me try to clean around that edge a bit, and then I'll continue getting the plate off. Might have just been dirt. Let me try to remove it again. Oh, I can just remove the whole stem with it. I'm just going to take a couple of photos of this so I'm not confused on the positioning of this once I get everything apart. I have all the parts removed. Everything looks very almost rusted, very oily, greasy. I need to clean this up really well. Here you can see what I like to call a screw-shaped gear, but it needs a really good cleaning. And this plate I want to remove, and what I'm seeing is that I'm pretty sure this dial was just glued on here, because when I look at the edge of it right over here, I see a nut that's holding this post on, because this gear here that I'm trying to turn, it's very sluggish, it's very tight. I need to remove this piece so I can thoroughly clean and lubricate it. So I will have to try to peel this off, probably destroying it as I go, and it feels like it's cardboard, maybe with a foil face. You can see how it's coming off. So I'll work on getting this off, then I can remove this plate. And once I have all of this off, I will continue. I just want to put all these pieces aside so nothing gets lost. Okay. Now to go back to work on this. I was able to free up the dial and get it removed. Now I'm going to undo the 3 nuts and get this back plate off of here so that I can clean it up. These come out as well. Oh. Okay, let me add this to the ultrasonic and get this part cleaned up as well. I've cleaned up and lubricated all the parts, all the gears, cleaned up the plates. This particular one is now spinning quite freely. The screw type gear on this plate had a ton of crud gunked in here. I was able to clean all of that out. The one thing I couldn't do was lubricate the rotor. I wasn't able to figure out how to get into it, so I'm not going to bother trying. I'm just going to leave it as it is. And what I want to show next is the idea that I have in order to place this Lincoln mechanism and plate into the back of my New Haven clock case. So let me show you what I came up with that. Let me just move this aside for the moment. So what I'm doing is I have the case and I plan to use the original dial, and this will actually, using these little metal tabs here, I think I can attach it to this plate. I just have to bend them over at either end. So I think that'll work that way. Inside here, I'm going to place the glass. And then this will go over that. And everything is fitting really quite nicely. And the best part that I'm seeing so far is when I have it in like this, these 2 screws actually seem to be a little bit deeper than the case. So what I'm hoping is that when this plate fits over it, these screws will go through here and I'll be able to attach a nut to secure it. The only problem though is the position of these 2 posts don't match up with anything on here. So I have to somehow mark the position of these on the back of this plate and then drill 2 holes for it. That will be quite the challenge. And but what I want to do first is reassemble the mechanism, make sure that it's still working before I go to the trouble of doing that. So put this aside and I'll start reassembling. To reassemble this, I'm just going to reverse the steps that I did when I took it apart. So let me work on that. Okay, first this part goes here and this plate goes here, and I just have to insert these little posts with the nuts. I'm going to do that and then I'll continue. Let me try to zoom in to show you this part. First this one, and then this. Next, I just have to position this plate over these 3 posts and then place the nuts back on it. So I'll work on that and then we'll continue. And I'll just zoom back out again here. And you may notice they still look quite rusty and dirty, but they're really cleaned up as well as I could get it. And whatever this is, it's not coming off, even if I tried using a bit of a liquid wrench, which kind of cuts through some rust, and it didn't do anything with it. But it is clean and it is lubricated. So let me get this plate on next. I've seated the plate. Before I secure it with the nuts, I have to put this broken gasket back on. Either a gasket or a spacer, I'm not sure, but okay. Next I'll secure these 3 nuts and then we'll continue. Next I have to seat the rotor, but I want to show one thing. Earlier I mentioned I couldn't find any way to lubricate this, but when I took a really close look at the spindle that comes out of the center stem, a little bit of play in it, and when I looked closely where it enters the rotor, just a small little gap sort of where it spins around. So I just put a few drops of a synthetic clock oil in there, and hopefully that'll do the job. But anyhow, let me get this seated. Okay, I just have to place the 3 nuts on here, and then I'll be ready to attach a power cord and see if it works. The rotor is on tight, and now for the power cord. Okay, now I'll plug it in. And turn it on. And hopefully it's going to reach full speed on its own. If not, that could be a problem. I wouldn't want to have to open up the clock every time you plug it in to get it going. There we go. Well, so far it appears that the little lubrication I gave it really hasn't done very much. But let's turn it off and turn it back on and see what happens. A little better. It reached speed on its own. Try it again. Well, it is technically working, and I'm just going to proceed and hope for the best as far as this thing reaching full speed every time you power up. What I'm going to do now is work on getting this plate to fit into the case. So what I plan to do is I'm going to remove this whole mechanism from the plate. I'll take off the nuts and then just reattach them to this post so that everything stays intact. So let me work on getting this apart and then we'll continue. I might have come up with a way to figure this out. If you recall, what I said was the challenge is when I have this seated in here, these 2 stems have to pass through a couple of holes in this back plate. And the question is, where am I going to drill my 2 holes? And I think the easiest way that this might work is if I do this. First, I'm going to try to seat it exactly how the clock's going to be put together. First with the glass, then with the dial, then the plate, I have to try to position it exactly where I think it's going to go. Now, when I seat the back over this, I can feel it riding on here. This is not going all the way down. So the challenge is to mark these two posts so that it leaves a mark on the plate. And I think that the simplest way to do it is with some nail polish. So let's give this a try. I put a drop here and a drop here. And I just seat the plate on the back of it. And there's my two dots. So I'm going to go ahead and drill a hole here and here. So let me get to work on that. I've clamped the back plate down to a work table here so it doesn't move around. And I like to use the smallest drill bit I can to sort of make a pilot hole. And then I'll make it larger. There's one. Okay, there's two. What I'm going to do next is gradually widen the holes with increasing larger drill bits. All right, now let's see if they're wide enough to fit the stems on the back of that plate that I have. Okay, here's the plate. And that's going to work. That is going to work. There you go. Okay, next I'm going to fit the whole thing back into the case and see that I have enough clearance here for the nuts to fit over these stems here. So far, pretty good. Okay, what I've done next is I wasn't happy with how sluggish this rotor was going, so I added a little bit more oil to it, and then I've let it sit overnight. I have it plugged in, and I'm going to give it what I call a cold start, just to see how long it takes for it to get up to speed. So let me flip it on. Hopefully it won't take too long. I usually don't try to add a lot of oil to these because I kind of think that too much oil is just as bad, if not worse, than too little oil. And it's definitely took a little bit of time, but it is up to speed. So I'm pretty happy about that, and I think this should work out. So let's proceed with inserting this whole rotor assembly back onto the plate here. So I'll work on that, and when that's set up, we'll be ready to put it into the case. I've attached the mechanism to the plate. What I have to do next is secure the dial. There's a couple of metal tabs to bend. One is already bent on the bottom. I have to bend this one up over the top. I've secured the dial to the plate, and this is kind of funny knot. I was looking to try to determine, do I attach a power cord to this now, or do I mount this back onto the plate? And when I held it up to the plate and fit these two stems into the holes that I drilled, I discovered that the stem that controls the set knob also has to go through a hole in the back of this. So I need to drill another hole to get this one to fit, which means I have to do the same thing with a little bit of nail polish here, try to mark the spot, and drill another hole. So let me get to work on that. Using the same technique, I drilled another hole, and when I line it up now, all three pass through the plate. 1, 2, 3. And what I'm going to do next is attach the power cord, passing it through this hole in the bottom of the plate here, and then I'll connect it with the nuts on the back of this. So let me get working on that and then we'll continue. I passed the wire through the plate, placed a knot in it. Now I'm going to connect it to the motor. Now, ready to place this in the plate and attach the nuts, and then I'll be ready to insert it into the case. Okay, next in here, have to seat the glass. This will go in and then secure it with the screws here. Let me work on that. Okay, I have to rotate that a little bit crooked. That's looking better. Now to secure it with the screws. I'll place them in and then we'll continue. But before doing that, and I hope some of you have been paying attention, because I still have to seat the hands. So let me work on that. First the hour hand and the minute hand. And lastly, the second hand. Now, I can work on placing the screws, and then we'll continue. I've inserted the screws, everything is together. I also came up with a knob that I can use on the set stem. And this actually came from a Hammond clock. It's what's used to start them. You give that a spin to get those going. And let's set this up, plug it in again, and give it a test run. I have it plugged in. Let me turn it on. And it's running. So there you have it, what started out as a New Haven alarm clock, but it's been repaired by using the mechanism from a Lincoln clock, which had a reference inside of that to Hopalong Cassidy. I still have no idea where that came from, and was finished off by using a start knob from a Hammond clock as my set knob. So the final product is no longer an alarm clock, but it is running. I do believe it was manufactured somewhere from the late 1930s to possibly the early 1940s, based on the Art Deco design. And I hope you enjoyed the video. It was a rather lengthy one, but it was quite the challenge. And that pretty much wraps things up. Bye for now.